GameMasters here, and today we are going to review a new supplement for D&D, the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Now, this is a campaign book of sorts. It's really a source book that is more designed towards the horror-themed campaign for DMs to, well, delve into the realm of horror. The game itself, or the book itself rather, releases on May 18th of 2021 this year. And there are two versions of the book, or two covers of the book rather, not two versions but two covers. You have this one, which is their regular cover, and you also have this one behind me, which is the collector's edition. And I want to give a shout out to the artist that did the artwork for these. You have Anna Podenwarna, and you have Scott M. Fisher. We never really talk about the artists, but I wanted to give them a shout out because this is some fantastic artwork on these. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump straight on into the book. The book itself is, we're going to jump to the last page first. Spoilers. The book itself is, if I could turn the pages, is 256 pages. You have the spirit board, which we'll get into in a little bit. And I have a suspicion about something in here. Something very horror-worthy. But we'll get into that a little bit later too. So for now, we want to jump over to there's a platen. We want to jump over to the table of contents. So first off, you have chapter 1 that's going to go over the character creation. Then chapter 2 talks mainly about creating the domains of dread. This is more geared towards your DM that wants to do a homebrew setting in Ravenloft. And then you have information to pull from in chapter 3, the actual domains of Ravenloft, the domains of dread within Ravenloft. And you'll see that covers a huge chunk of this book. It goes from page 60 to page 183. So about 120 pages of this book is dedicated towards the different domains in it. Technically page 38, because that talks about actually homebrewing your own or creating your own. Then you have a small little section, about 18 pages or so of campaign horror adventures. And then the remainder of the book, short of the index, remainder of the book from about pages 222 to 255, so you've got about 30 pages of Monsters of Ravenloft. Some of these pop up in the in the regular monster manual, but some of them are exclusive to Ravenloft itself. So, without further ado, I wanted to check out a couple of key elements here. Why don't we just flip to a random page first and check it out. So, let me get to, actually no, I'm not going to flip to a random page. I want to kind of go through this, not one page at a time, but let's check out page 15. This is actually creating a character. So you're going to have lineages. Basically what lineages are is, in character creation, in Ravenloft, you have to determine, or it's up to the player, the DM could figure it out, I guess, too, if they wanted to, but it would be better for the player to come up with why they're there. So let me back up just a little bit. In traditional Ravenloft, characters would come over from a different world, different realm, Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, etc., and they would enter Ravenloft through a mist. And their past, or their history, what made the character that character, was created pre-mist. Ravenloft was originally not a campaign setting, but a module for characters to go and experience a horror play. Well, in this instance, and in this regard, this is actually now allowing you to create characters within Ravenloft. You could have an entire campaign that runs completely in Ravenloft, and this tells you how to create the character. What made that character a part of Ravenloft? Did your character do something so intrinsically evil that it created its own domain of dread around that character? Or was your character just an innocent bystander in a more sinister plot that took place in Ravenloft That's what all this goes into, or the character creation goes into. You have habits of horror heroes. Again, that is, think about a horror movie. Think about all the tropes that take place in a horror movie. You've got a little touch of comedy, and I'm talking like true horror movie. That's what this is really designed for, is true horror. And I'm talking like, you know, take your movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Saw. There's might be one or two one-liners in there, but for the most part, you're talking just pure terror. Go back to the original Nightmare on Elm Street. A little more heavy on the comedy side. Look at the original Friday the 13th. Not so much comedy. More just pure horror, slasher horror. You could do that in here. You could have comedy in there if you really wanted, but their focus on this is less comedy, more horror. And one section that I did find, let me see if I can quickly flip to it. It is the... yeah, kind of the genres of horror, page 45. Now this jumps into kind of creating the domains of dread. And it basically kind of goes over what your different genres of horror are. You've got, let me take a look at the camera, make sure we've got this. Okay, so you've got body horror, cosmic horror. This is something we're going to get into in a little bit. This is what I have a suspicion about. Dark fantasy, ghost stories, and I'm kind of going through this quickly just so you have an idea. Gothic horror, and then you have some other ones here: disaster horror, occult detective stories, psychological horror, slasher horror. This is where Freddy or Jason would come into. And then it goes into the domains themselves. Now, why do I talk about, what is my suspicion? My suspicion, I was kind of flipping through this earlier, and I ran across a monster. Hey, we have zombies, yay. Those have to be in any horror genre now. But what I ran across was this guy right here. This is a star spawn emissary. So, if you're familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, the star spawn emissary, I feel the description that they give in here, which is basically they are the fingers of alien realms, digits that tip the scales of reality toward terror. They are unimaginable masters or giant. Well, I can't talk. They are unimaginable masters or distant, greater manifestations of themselves. This is directly I can't help but feel that this is directly pulled from Cthulhu. And I would love nothing more. Years ago, they came out with a D20 Call of Cthulhu game. I had a lot of fun playing it. Lost my copy of it, unfortunately. It was a book and D20 based on the D20 system. And unfortunately, I lost my book. And I'm really hoping by the inclusion of this, that this is a hint towards a good, pure Gothic horror setting like Call of Cthulhu. I would love to see that come back as 5th edition. That's what my suspicion is. You heard me kind of refer to it a couple of times earlier in the video, but that's kind of what my suspicion is. I've heard a lot of folks clamoring to know a little bit about the brain in a jar. Let's see if we can find... Yeah, here we go. The brain in a jar. So, I have to be careful. I don't want to show too much of the book off because, well... You need to go out and get the book. I mean, this is a really cool setting, but I will show off Brain in a Jar. Brain in a Jar is exactly what you see here. It is a brain that's inside a jar. It is a way in which the individual's brain is taken out surgically, thrown into a jar, and uses... psionic, telepathic abilities. Let's see. Brain and Jar can speak without vocal cords, psionically projecting the disembodied voice outward for all to hear. Okay. This is something, it's not a new creature, it's been around for a while. I cannot really remember the origins of it. Speaking of... Actually, if you do remember the origins of this, leave me a comment about it below. I'd like to research it a little bit further. But I did have another I did remember seeing something else. This is back in... Okay, so let me find this one. I think this is one of my better memories of the game. And I just want to find exactly where it's at in here. Okay, what I was looking for, when I was flipping through the different domains and checking them out earlier, I noticed there was one section that just sounded so familiar to me, and it was O'Dare. Essentially, O'Dare is a domain that has a Dark Lord called Maligno. That name sounded really familiar, but there was a toy maker named Giuseppe, sounded really familiar to me, that had his wish for a family granted when his creation, the marionette Figlio, came to life. Well, Figlio basically murdered everybody in the town of O'Dare, leaving only the children. That act caused the mists of Ravenloft to envelop the town and transport it into Ravenloft. And it just sounded so familiar. I went back through and found this module in my library, the Created, and notice it's from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, 2nd edition. And this was a RM2 adventure suitable for characters levels 2 to 4. In the back of it, beware what you wish for it might come true, is an old Vistani saying. By the way, Vistani are in the Van Richten's Guide. In the small town of O'Dare, a toy maker has wished a puppet to life. That's exactly what I just read here. Only this puppet is not a friendly, playful toy. It is a thing of evil, bent upon killing all the adults in O'Dare. Sound familiar? Yeah, it did to me. When the player characters are trapped within this town, Maligno, the puppet, and his animated toys begin to hunt them down. The PC's only chance for escape is to defeat the mad marionette. So, what did we say the name was? Maligno is what he turned into. Figlio. Figlio was the puppet that Giuseppe created that turned into Maligno. And so now he runs the whole town and only has kids to rule over because he's killed all of the adults. The last thing that I wanted to go over was a neat little section for horror adventures, chapter 4. And I want to give me a second. Okay. So this section basically goes over how to prepare for creating your own homebrew horror game, session, campaign. It kind of has you go through understanding what horror is, and it tells you, it recommends to you to set the expectations with all your players first in case somebody feels uncomfortable with, say, snakes, for example. You may not want to have a snake-heavy or snake-laden heavy campaign. Another person may be scared of spiders. Another one may be scared of, or may have a trigger of some other horrific event. Probably best to get that, to know what that is so that you don't include that in your campaign. That's the last thing anybody really needs is really to have a majorly upset player because of something that has happened in their past that you've included in here without even knowing it. I'm not saying that all horror is bad, but some people have gone through some true life horrors, and you probably don't want to include that in your campaign. But this section kind of details out various things. But what's also cool is it talks about how to create a horror atmosphere. Dimming the lights, for example, having some sinister ambient music playing in the background, even props. And there's one section of this that I really loved, and it's something that I use. I just don't realize that I'm using it. And that is kind of detailed here. So it basically it talks about pacing. And I'll try to give you an example right here. So when you want to create a little tension, you start off by having a slightly slower pace in your words. You want to give a very elaborate description. And then all of a sudden you want to start picking that pace up a little bit and throwing the words a little faster, kind of giving them a little bit of confusion, going, okay, well, what's going on next? All of a sudden a monster comes around the corner. Roll a d20. Did you get a 2? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, what are you going to do next? You need to hurry up and tell me, because this monster is approaching faster and faster and faster. Now you need to make a check, and you just took some damage. I mean, that's a great way to inject horror into it, is to create a sense of urgency, to create a sense of uneasiness. Idle uneasiness, this is what this one talks about, is the drawing the words out. The out of time is compressing those words, making them faster, making things happen all at once. I just kind of love that little section, how it kind of details out. And you can use this, what's cool about this particular section, you could use this for other things other than D&D. So if you are a horror writer, feed off of this. There is some great information in here. Anyway, guys, that is a brief rundown of the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. That is my first glance at it with you guys. And I do anticipate to kind of go a little bit more in depth about different sections in this. So if you have any just burning questions that you got to know answers to, feel free to leave me a comment below. Let me know what those questions are, and I'll do my best to try to answer them in future videos pertaining to Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Until next time, actually, let me throw in a little plug. If you like what you see, please subscribe. That's the important thing here for me, is to have everybody subscribe to my channel. It'll help me produce hopefully better videos, but also allow me a slightly more professional setting. That would be awesome. But until then, until the next video, this is GameMasters saying to, I don't know, fly around with your fangs out.